So my name's Colson Griffith, and my business is called the Vanity Portrait Studio. Started about 3 years ago, and we specialize in making magazine-style portraits of guests at events. And I've been in the photography world for probably about 11 years now. April 28th will be my 11th anniversary. So,
Wow.
yeah, so that's since going full-time. I left the semiconductor sales world to go be a professional photographer. And so, yeah, 11 years in the making. But yeah, and we, our business, we mostly focused on the events industry. We bring studios to events and then give people a great portrait experience. We edit and print those pictures out and give people something to go home with at the end of the night that they're really proud about.
Sure. I mean, considering the pandemic, has that changed at all?
Oh, you could say so. Yeah, it's been tremendously unfortunate. We went to a conference in Vegas on March 11th, and we were able to showcase, and even that in the back of my mind was a little nerve-wracking because we were working with, there was an event with 1,700 people, and I was nervous about being amongst that many people. And so I was like, okay, well, we're still on the front end of things. And then literally, like, it was a high coming off that event and meeting all these event planners and thinking about possibility. And then, like, that was a Wednesday. And then by the time Friday hit, it was like everything's shut down. Yeah. So the ideas of, events happening at all just completely disappeared. Yeah. And so for me, that was just, it shut off the revenue. And then I started to have to actually, in the wording in my contract was not bulletproof. So it allowed people to request refunds of their money and their deposits. And so I went through kind of a panic mode, just trying to figure out what to do.
Sure. So, I mean, since that realization of your contracts, have you taken time to bulletize those or?
Yeah, in my own unprofessional lawyer ways. Yeah, I think, similar to what we're doing now, there's some other business owners that I've been fortunate to connect with as well. And so I'm learning a little bit about what, like, the events industry is doing in terms of contract modification and, like, best practice for wording. I've heard of some business owners, they've had contracts which have included clauses, non-refundable deposits and things like that, but then they're experiencing some pushback based around other clauses called, like, force majeure. And so that's kind of like the act of God. And so clients are actually telling vendors, hey, force majeure is going to cover this. So basically your cancellation contract or your cancellation clause is null and void. So it sounds like there's, a couple different areas that people were vulnerable. And at the end of the day, I'm not smart enough to actually put the words together on a contract officially. Sure. But I think I've learned a little bit about, specific language that you can have in a contract that would help for future, pandemics.
Sure. So, I mean, it sounds like it's best to consult a lawyer to really get that dialed in.
Just don't consult me. If anything, I can tell you what I'm doing, but I can't say it's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know everything is kind of turned upside down, right? I mean, from the large corporations to those of us like you and I that are small businesses and entrepreneurs that are completely out of work, and, contracts, like you said, I mean, sometimes don't necessarily hold up in this type of circumstance. I don't think anybody expected this.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is, like, I think when you get started with your business, everybody always says, make sure you have a contract in place, make sure you have a contract in place. And so you're like, yeah. And I mean, I think in, 10.9 years, I probably went back to my contract with a client 3 times, like once every 3 or 4 years. So it doesn't seem like it's a huge pressing issue. But for me, this is how the error in my contract has caused me more loss of financial stability and more stress than anything I could have imagined. I mean, and that goes for a lot of people in a lot of different ways, but that's one area that I definitely see. Had I consulted someone in a more professional way around that, I think maybe it would have eased, or I don't think it would have eliminated my problem, but I think it would have eased it.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's a different scale, but if you look at the airlines, even, I mean, they're extending refunds left and right, change ticket. They're allowing you to change the flights without a fee, and they're pivoting as well. How do you see the event industry bouncing back, or how do you see it shifting?
I'm excited. I'm going to a webinar tomorrow, which is actually a bunch of events industry business leaders. So I'm excited to glean some knowledge from them. But what I'm seeing is that thankfully a lot of people are opting to reschedule as opposed to cancel altogether. Mm-hmm. So that is allowing us to keep some of those deposits. I think the standard business model is to take a deposit and then full payment, closer to the event, either before or after. And so from like a revenue standpoint, like I think you can, if you're able to, and then there's kind of 2 classes of events. I think corporate events, they can kind of they can pass an event and say, okay, we're not doing the developer conference for 2020. We're just going to do it in 2021. And then then they'll just weather the storm that way. Whereas I think, so that's corporate events. And then I think social events, weddings, people are not deciding not to get married altogether. They're mostly planning to defer. So, there's a friend of mine, his name's Adam Goldstein from Gatsby Entertainment. And he got really involved in corporate events, but he always said, I never want to forget my social events, because he said, my dad's been in this industry for a long time, and I've been in this industry for a long time. And he goes, the social events don't go away. So they can kind of be your lifeline through something like this. Whereas the corporate stuff can be a bit more fickle because it's not as emotionally, people aren't as emotionally invested in those events, mm-hmm. As they are, like those life moments and milestones, weddings, and, maybe 50th, 60th, 70th birthday kind of things.
Sure. So, I mean, it sounds like you're diversified. I mean, I know you are, but like the concern for the corporate stuff, maybe rescheduling, and then the social events as well, rescheduling, or, happening later in the year. I know a lot of what you do happens towards the end of the year anyways. Mm-hmm. That this pandemic is going to affect that, and you're just holding on, or do you have a little more concern about it?
Yeah, I do have concern with like the rescheduling. So, say we get through this and it's like 3, 4, 5 months, like who knows how long. And then they turn events back on, and then we can all say, so then we're going to go try and shove all our rescheduled events for like the past 3 or 4 months. And we're going to either try to do them, before December. Because for us, December is a write-off. Like we don't book weddings, we don't book social anything in December because corporate events is so insane. So I think there's going to be a slingshot effect where we're going to do this big drawback, and then when they turn it back on, you're going to be double booked, triple booked for weekends, in particular, the Friday nights and the Saturday nights. Those are all going to be in high demand. So it's kind of this weird, like, I'm kind of preparing for this famine, and then I don't want to call it a feast because I think it's not going to happen overnight, but I know that there's going to be a push for getting as many events in as we can. And I think the other thing a lot of people are doing is they're offering specials and discounts right now, like a book today during this downtime, and we'll offer a discounted rate or whatever it may be. So I think people are still going to be aggressive about booking events. And then in that case, if you're bringing your margins down by offering discounts, you're going to have to make up for it in volume.
Right.
So I see this being like an unfortunately slow time, and then it'll probably go kind of crazy towards the end of the year.
Yeah. Now you have a pretty big team, so booking 2 and 3 events a night is not really a big concern. Is that?
For me, it is and it isn't. I mean, if I have gear going 3 or 4 different, it's like I've been able to do a lot with a small team, but now we're in this world where independent contractor versus employee is like at the top of everyone's mind. Quite frankly, I've been able to work with a lot of contractors who've been like great partners, and we try to compensate them in a way that they feel is fair and adequate, so we don't risk, a sense of someone being taken advantage of. I don't want someone to come back to me and say, hey, like, I should have, deserved this extra pay because I'm owed it. I'm hoping that our wages for contractors sort of ease those concerns. But yeah, so I do want to bring on more employees because I think that that's the right thing to do at this point. And again, we had to temporarily lay off our team, which is devastating. But then I kind of see, and we had 3 full-time people and then myself. And now I see us probably needing 5 or 6 full-time people once we get like back on board. So possibly doubling the number of people just to serve, serve the quantity of events that I think we're going to have in the last half.
Yeah. If you had like one key piece of advice for people preparing for this famine, what would that be?
Just one. Choose one thing.
Yeah. Okay. If you got 10, give me 2.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think the CARES Act that was just passed is tremendously important for business people. If you have a business, if you have a team, there's provisions for self-employed people, for sole proprietors. There's provisions for contractors. I would take advantage of every bit of that you can, because I don't think events are going away. I think afterwards people are going to be hankering for events. We want to get back together. We've been in isolation so long. We're like the idea of a party right now is just like orgasmic.
Right.
So we all want to be out and about. I understand the spending side of it might take a bit, but I think that events is going to be strong. And really, it's a cash flow problem right now. Mm-hmm. So if you can fix your cash flow problem as a business owner by taking advantage of some of the economic stimulus that's available, that's amazing. And then it also prevents the trickle down of, say we had to lay off our employees because we had a cash problem. But as soon as we can fix the cash problem with the stimulus money, we can bring them back on board and then help ensure that they're getting the funds that they need to pay the people that, their rent and their grocery stores and their everything, so that they're contributing to the economic, ecosystem as well. Mm-hmm. I think the stimulus program, I'm actually pretty pleased with it. I've actually found it to be very accessible for people that have businesses. I feel like I've never qualified for a government program ever.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is actually one that's okay, they're giving this a fair shot to people. Yeah. So I'd say that. And then I also would say doing exactly what we're doing. I'm afraid of going into a dark hole and like being scared. So I'm trying to, spend more time reaching out to people, provide content and value, and help where I can. And then also work on the business.
Yeah. That makes great sense. I mean, I think the challenges for those that don't have a reserve, that are going to definitely need to take advantage of the stimulus package and weather the storm, so to speak. I think things will come back. I think that events will come back, and like you said, I mean, it will be maybe a dry spell, and then it'll be a spike, and things will resume, maybe a little hectic, a little crazy for a while, and then kind of return. How do you see the importance of like digital events or streamed events?
I'm still adjusting to that. Honestly, I think it's I think the webinar stuff has been like tremendously helpful. I've not participated in a streamed event. I understand that there's some inkling to want to do that right now. It hasn't suited my personal needs beyond like wanting to do a webinar similar to this. I guess I don't know too much about it. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What are you hearing?
Well, I mean, I've been paying attention to some of the live streaming events for quite a while, even maybe more of a pre-recorded event where, different filmmakers would record their piece, share their screen, and then a virtual conference would be generated from that, including, live Q&A once they're actually posting it. So then they have their team responding, and then also being able to download the content. And I feel like in a similar fashion, that could gain a little traction in today's market, but it's not my cup of tea. It's not something that I specialize in. I mean, I know people that do specialize in that, and they've seen an extreme growth during this time. I think the overall intensity of content creation now has become somewhat overwhelming,
It's like, it's not a matter of if I have a webinar, it's like, which one do I want to watch?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to learn. I know you just put together a little piece on making Zoom meetings and conference calling a better scenario. What was it like creating that?
It was the first thing I did that actually felt like it was helping someone in this time. So that was good. I listened to there was another webinar I listened to, and the guy, his name is Mike. Just send me an email. Michael Witz. He wrote a book called Profit First, but I listened to a webinar that he said, and he said, if you're kind of struggling with what to do right now in terms of your, like you can't do events, or you can't serve food, or you can't, or whatever it is. He said, kind of look back in the supply chain of like what you either had to learn or what you had to procure in order to ultimately, and the example he used was like put the dish on the table. So he said, if you had to, in order to get the dish on the table, you had to train a wait staff. So why don't you start offering like a training program for like how to run a wait staff like team, or how to cook, or start offering you recipes online, and like in terms of like ideas for creating content. And he said, well, maybe you're like a whole animal butcher, and so you need to get that plate on the table, but you also know how to butcher an animal because that's what you do like way early in the process. And I love that idea for helping people identify different content that they could start putting together. He basically said, look at your end product and then go through like the generation of steps that you need to take to get to that final end result. And then anything previously in that lineup could be a place for you to either like sell a new product or create content, coming up with ideas to just keep yourself going during this time. So I kind of gleaned that like inspiration from that from that comment, and then that allowed me to create that Zoom thing, which is cool. And then I think we're going to do some other stuff around like posing, how to pose yourself for a photo.
Yeah.
Just trying to help people learn something.
Yeah. Yeah. I read an article that was put out by Ad Age or Ad Week. And it was talking about the big brands, how they're like kind of pivoting themselves because there's no content really being created by big productions, which is what I work on, big photo shoots and big video productions, and how they're turning to stock footage, repurposed footage. So re-editing or reusing images for other purposes than originally intended, as well as relying on user content. And then of course there's the production people or the photographers that are, setting up a little studio in their living room or their kitchen and creating content that way. So there's definitely a splurge. And I just wonder long term, from that perspective on, will we go back to big productions, or will we just say, you know what, it's amazing the amount of quality and content that we can kick out without a big budget or with, are we shooting ourselves in the foot by staying busy?
Yeah. I wonder about that as well. Our product is like extremely hands-on. You mentioned virtual events, and for me, to pivot towards a virtual event, I could wrap my mind around how to take a picture of someone remotely, or I don't even know if that's what that would be. But for me, it's sort of in opposition to what I love about what we do, and not to be the stubborn guy in the room, but like, what fills you up? Like, why are you doing the work that you're doing? For me, it goes back to like a very interpersonal experience. So the idea of transitioning to virtual events is almost in direct opposition of that. And so for me, I already work from home, I work in my garage, and like, I already do so much where I'm not with people. And so then to shift our product so that that's also not with people, I just am sort of like shunning that a little bit. So I'd rather pivot towards something that still allowed me to be with people as opposed to encouraging. I mean, again, with specific regard to the virtual stuff.
Yeah, totally. Considering like the situation, if there was three things that you would, maybe not even three things, but, something to stay ahead of it. We talk financially and talking about weathering the storm and, dealing with the famine, but, what are some things that you might suggest to stay ahead of this, proactively?
Yeah, I think knowing who your customer is like so important. I found there's so many people who are targeting business leaders right now, and they're doing a very good job of identifying me as like this person who has a business, who's been impacted. And so they've identified me as their audience, and they're speaking directly to me, and everything that I hear from them is like a direct hit. And I sort of feel like the allegiance towards those companies and interactions like growing. So I feel like when I'm able to spend, or when I'm, like the legal team that's doing a webinar a week about, the ramifications of your employment situation, either letting people go or keeping them on under different circumstances. But like, yeah, they're going to be the ones that get my legal, business about employment law, like for sure. So I feel like knowing your customer and knowing like what they need, and also knowing what they're going through right now, and then speaking directly to that, I would say is like a super critical way to stay like ahead of this. And from everything I've learned, when you speak in marketing speak, it's about, talking to your customer, saying you, what's happening in your life? I want to help you, not, look at me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think just like really holding your customer's hand through this and knowing who your customer is and
Mm-hmm.
speaking in a way that really like resonates with them is going to build strong allegiance with them. And when they're prepared to spend money, then I think that you'll be well positioned to have people come back to you.
Yeah, no, I read an article this morning and I can't remember where I found it, but it was kind of talking about, like myself even. I mean, I'm constantly moving, even when I'm not in this, pandemic. I'm like working at the studio. I'm on location. I'm out here. I'm out there, and all of this stuff. And so now I found myself with like even this thing. It's like my brain is just going, go get it, go get it, go get it, do it, like make it, be a creator, like like kind of feeding into my natural gifts and talents. But this article was really talking about taking time to like be bored. Because when you're bored and you let your mind just roam around, it stems creativity. Have you been taking some time to relax? And if so, like what have you been thinking about?
Yeah, no, I love that you're kind of reshaping the topic, and I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying, with the idea of like taking a step back. And I also feel sort of the anxiety of like, you got to go do something, you got to pivot, you got to like take advantage. And honestly, I said to my wife, I said, if I hear the word pivot again, I'm going to scream. Like, it's just like the buzzword. It's just,
it's like new hashtag.
Stop saying that. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and it like, I literally took 2 weeks of like freaking out, and I didn't do anything productive. But I, at the same time, everybody's like, stay positive and, like adapt and, be willing to change. And I'm just like, I'm trying not to drown, And so I took 2 weeks of just having a lot of anxiety around all this. And then now I have felt that, I don't know, just a little bit of stuff I've done, which has felt coming from a place of helping, that has been good for me as well. Like it's felt good. And so that's been cool. But like, yeah, the idea of just stepping away, I think is super important. I have a little 1-year-old, so the idea of a quiet moment is a bit of a far-fetched thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've also been reading a lot of like business books, but I feel like just reading a book for the sake of reading, just to get lost in your brain and maybe some, not true story and not life altering sort of lesson or something like that. It sounds really appealing right now. Like I would really love to just not do that. Also, I watched Tiger King, and
I was just gonna say, like, that's the perfect.
Just watch Tiger King. It's the solution to everything.
No other time in history would that be a success.
Dude, it's just blowing up right now.
Yeah. That's crazy. Speaking of, how is the family?
Oh, we're good. Yeah. It is kind of a cool thing to be a little bit. The reality is I don't have as much work right now. So yeah, I'm getting to spend more time with my, with Caden. He's 13 months. And so that's cool. And I think my wife and I are trying to figure out, even long term, like just taking a look at our workload and saying like, well, what do we want as a family? Like, what do the values look like? And that's been good. But Linda's itching to get back to work, so she's going to help me with the marketing stuff a little bit.
Yeah, I thought she was working on the company full time. Is that?
She has been, and then also kind of a maternity leave situation. So yeah, we have an extended maternity leave policy.
It's so funny. I spoke to someone else recently, Alexandra Liss. I don't know if you are familiar with her, but she has a 2-year-old, 2.5, and she's like, I've been in pandemic mode for the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, man. And now, and then parents teaching at home. I mean, I think just adding that level of, intentionality to your day, where now you're having to not only, fend for yourself, fend for your livelihood and your business or your work or whatever it is, but then also educating your kids. And, I think there is a little bit of leeway, like, okay, if it's 3 months, they're not going to fall apart. But at the same time, you want to feel good about how your kids are growing. So there's some added pressure there to be involved and to do stuff.
Well, listen, Colson, I know we said about half an hour or so, and we've gone well beyond that.
That sounds about right for me.
Just thankful for your time and your insight. And I really look forward to, watching all of us come out of this together.
Yeah. And you as well, Sean. I like I said, thanks for being a catalyst for starting the conversation. And, I think we both will probably get something out of this if not, anybody else. But yeah, thanks for encouraging me. Similarly, this is like seeing that you were doing this was a good kick in the butt for me. So appreciate it.